Yep, we're good.
Good evening and welcome to the Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting of September 9th, 2015. I call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is approval of the minutes, which I will postpone, seeing how they were just put in everybody's packet this evening. To give you an opportunity to read them, we'll add that on at the next meeting. Second thing on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Hearing, seeing none. We'll move on to recognitions.
In your packets, there is a picture of a welcome to Monomoy Regional High School Home of the Sharks sign with some bites taken out of it that was donated to the high school by Jerry Evans of Chatham, Wind and Time. That's going to get hung right outside of the main office in here, so I'd like to thank Mr. Evans for his donation. We also have a very interesting donation that one of our wellness teachers sent an email about that, I guess, over the course of the summer. He happened to bump into tennis legend Billie Jean King, who donated to Chatham Elementary School and the gym program here at Monomoy Regional. $1,000 worth of Wilson Myland World Team tennis rackets.
Wow, that's so cool.
So you never know. You never know who you're going to bump into. And lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge that there was the annual Westgate meeting this past week here in the library. Mary Hemian did a presentation of a new way to approach different sorts of algebraic problems, of which the superintendent clearly demonstrated that he needs to take for class and learn different ways to do word problems in math, because apparently I got mine way off. The extra help session from Mary, but it was nice to hear her describe how she went through the process of this class and was able to break down complex word problems and find other ways to draw out solutions and really help the comprehension. And clearly that wasn't in my background or bag of tricks that I learned in math, and for that matter, for most of us in this room, that wasn't in any of our ways that our teachers were describing it. So it's sort of a new ways to teach math that our math department chair here at the high school was sharing and taking back to her group, and then I regretfully did not go and get to stay for Rich Houston's presentation. I don't know if you want to just give a quick little blurb on what the presentation was, Rick.
You dodged the bullet. It was about the Civil War. So I had a 2-week tour of the South, going to 25 battlefields, 12 civil rights museums, 17 states, 3,700 miles, and it was fantastic.
And it looked like Rich hit every gift shop along the way.
I did bring some of the manipulatives that the students will be exposed to over the next year. In 4 of my classes, we start out the year doing the Civil War, so the timing couldn't have been any better.
So thank you.
Thank you to the Westgate. It was fantastic.
And that's it for the recognitions.
Very good. Reports and discussions. Number 1, the CVEC Project Net Feeder Credit.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
Hello, everybody. Grab this. Move over here. Apparently, I am a familiar face. Many of you remember me. I am I'm not actually the special projects coordinator anymore. I noticed I need to change it. I'm now the manager, programs and administration for the Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative. So just to bring a little background, bring everybody back to what CVAC is. We're a sister organization to the Cape Light Compact, which is the energy aggregator here on the Cape. And our mission is to bring forward renewable energy. We have brought 28 megawatts forward. We have an initial initiative which does include Monomoy because lo and behold, Harwich Elementary School has photovoltaics on it. And that is part of our initial initiative, which we now call the CVEX 7. That goes back to 2010. Then in 2011, we launched CVEX Round 1, which is 16 megawatts. You see them all over the capped landfills on the Cape, and if you go to Martha's Vineyard on Martha's Vineyard. Then right after that, we launched CVEX Initiative Round 2, which included more capped landfills and some roof installations. Oh, you know what I did? I loaded the one from the last time I was here. This isn't matching what you're seeing at all. Let me quickly put my drive back in. So sorry. No wonder I'm still the manager. Do it by date. All right, so now I'm the manager, programs and administration. Not much else has changed. And we're not going to go backwards. We just went over the 28 megawatts that are now up and running. It is the largest block of cooperative PV in New England, which we're really excited about. The projects will bring forward over $2 million. That was at June, at the end of FY15, end of June. So we've already passed the $3 million mark in terms of net metering credits that we are passing forward. We hope to do a PV initiative round 3, Monomoy schools being one of the participants. You need PV on your roof. We want to help you with that. And we got a grant for a $1.5 million battery backup system at DY High School Regional Emergency Shelter. That's lessons learned from Hurricane Sandy. If you burn out your diesel fuel, you're out. You don't have a source, can't pump any more diesel fuel. You're out of luck. If we can put in we have photovoltaics. If we can put in battery backup, we can extend the life of the diesel generators. So that's a grant from the state that we're bringing forward. We'd like to do more of that. If this is successful, we'd replicate it. And we also brought forward a project with Future Generation Wind that Monomoy School District is participating in that is in Plymouth, and it's on target, on schedule, and going in as we speak. CVIC did all of this at no capital cost to any of the participants or school districts. We were able to negotiate fixed price PPAs, which are unheard of. That savings, which if you compare it to the common type of PPA agreement, which usually carries an escalator of 2%, without that escalator of 2%, that savings over 20 years is about $664,000 for the typical round 1 system, which we're using Chatham's 1.8 megawatt system as a model. We also are allowing towns to develop more than the 10 megawatts they're limited to because the cooperative has its own 10 megawatts, so we've expanded everybody's ability to develop distributed generation. And we've optimized PV locations because we built them on the capped landfills, even beyond what the host towns could absorb, and then we're able to bring it to Monomoy School District or other towns that were not able to develop their own project to that degree. So we are here because we have an ask. In 2010, the CVEC board voted not to have what is commonly called an administrative operational adder on the 8 round 1 projects, which equals about 16 megawatts. That was because we had a round 2 project in the works, which had an adder of 1 cent for members and 1.5 cents for non-members. And that round 2 project portfolio was 69 megawatts. It was going to support round 1. Well, by the end of the permitting process, it had dwindled to 16 megawatts. So it was no longer able to support the round 1. So we recognize now that without an adder on the first round 1 portfolio, we can't maintain services for all participants at the level that we are now providing. So in the interest of fairness and to continue our services for everybody, last spring, the CVEC board voted to propose that we include an adder on the round one projects, similar to the adder that exists on round two. So what does that get you? I'm going to be very brief. This is too long. You can take it home, you can study it. But essentially, Sue Held will verify that there is a lot to managing this portfolio. The wonderful development of the off-taker program, where we have off-takers taking net metering credits from hosts that have too many, is wonderful, but it's very management, a lot goes into it. We also, because we've increased we're handling $3 million, our audits have grown in cost. And we want to keep those audits. That's very expensive. The annual reports, which I have a sample of, are very extensive, very helpful. I showed Sue Held one last week, and she agrees this is what she needs to be able to go to you and say, here's what we got this year. They can't do it on their own. It's so complex. We also work with the utility, and for that alone, we deserve a lot of accolades. They try, but they're overwhelmed by this system as well. And we work with the PV system owners to make sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do to keep these systems operating at full efficiency. We also have to provide annual reports to the DOER, and we help with some of the services like tax assessment, legal services, and so on. So what is this going to mean to Monomoy School District? Year one net estimated benefit from the round one and round two, for which you are all off-takers, and the future generation wind project, which you are an off-taker, you are looking to benefit at about $45,000 at the end of year one. If we had applied an adder of a penny per kilowatt hour to the round one projects only, it would amount to about $1,400. You would then be making less if we applied it, to the tune of about $44,000 instead of about $45,500. So that's a reduction of about 3%. That's what we're here for. Now, the net metering credit value, which is your actual benefit, is going to move, but it has historically gone up. We project it to go up, which meaning your benefit will go up over time as well. That's not calculated in here. What is it going to mean to CVEC? We have an annual income from round two, because remember, all of our projects had adders except for round one. We have an income of about $162,000. Our budget, which I have with me, and I'm going to leave copies, runs at $352,000. That's for this coming fiscal year. And the net income, or the loss in this case, is about $190,000. If we can get an adder on all of our round one projects, it will bring in another additional revenue of $197,000. So it's a good match. It will solve our problems, and we can continue to provide the services that Sue and others have come to expect. And at the end of 3 years, we're going to come back, we're going to revisit the adder, look at our budget, and see if we can discontinue it, or if we need to continue it or reduce it. One thing we're not going to do is raise it. So those are our promises and our needs, and I'm here to ask for your approval. Clearly, there's a contractual change. Your PPA will essentially change in our agreements. But what we need is an acceptance by all of our participants, committees and boards, so that we can then undertake the legal procedures. We certainly don't want to put the cart before the horse. So that's why CVEC is here.
Questions? Brian? We have a 20-year contract, right?
Correct.
And you're asking us to agree to this adder. I love the phraseology, off-takers and adders. There must be some English words for those, but
I
anyway.
think it's on a page.
And then you said that after 3 years, you're going to review it.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that at some point there's going to be an amended contract that we're going to have to sign.
Sooner than later. We're going around and getting the agreements verbatim, verbally, and then we'll go to the lawyers and amend the contracts and bring them to you.
So is the contract going to provide specifically for a review after 3 years?
Yes, because we're putting that out there, so it will.
So our commitment is only to the 3 years of the adder, and then it'll be reviewed, or is it a commitment to
That
20 years and then it will be reviewed?
That hasn't been agreed to by the board, but I think that's an important point that I should bring back to the board. I should ask that question very specifically. Will the new contract include a commitment to the 3-year review? We've gone public with it, which means that is our intention, but I need to get a board commitment to that. That's a good point. It certainly is out there, it's public, we can't renege on it, but I just don't know if the board will say, we don't want to have to go through the expense of a renegotiation at year 3, because again, we're trying to keep our costs down. So that's the only reason I would say it may not be part of the language, but it's a commitment. But then again, it's a good question, because that's part of our commitment, and you want to see it in writing.
So if we approve this, you're going around getting approval from all of the off-takers.
Correct.
Right.
And hosts.
And, okay, and I still don't know what off-taker is. But you're getting everybody's approval, at least as a concept. And then
Correct.
you're gonna have a new contract, which is gonna come back to our superintendent or our chair to sign.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we need to have an action item this evening, or do we do it next meeting?
To be honest, if you could, Scott and I discussed this, he said it's normal for you to do it next week. We have a board meeting next Thursday. If you'd rather not, if you'd like to wait till next week, that's fine.
We don't wait till 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
It would help CVEC move along, but I don't want to impose our schedule on your schedule.
So I would take that we're approving in theory the increase of 1 cent per kilowatt hour until we see their actual new contract.
Yep. So it could be a contingency kind of an approval.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request for the adder of 1 cent per kilowatt hour. I'll make the motion first.
And you could add on round 1 project.
Round 1 project.
I would second it.
You know, we entered into this in good faith, and I know they entered into it in good faith as well. It's clear that it's a minimal cost. We can't afford to have them go out of business, and we can't afford to have them operate in anything less than the most efficient, organized manner. So I do, you know, you went through it quickly, but I appreciate what we're paying for in that slide for what we get for a penny per kilowatt hour. So I think that's just basic cost benefit analysis is still a very good deal.
Anyone else? Karen?
I think that I would prefer if we could just kind of say what we think rather than take an official vote, since that's not what our procedure usually is.
Well,
So-
we have to agree in concept to it, so she can go back to the board and say that, you know, we agree in concept to the penny increase, but they want to see the contract.
I also think it would be important to understand, you know, the alternative. You know, if you were as a board to say no, understand from the superintendent and business office perspective, we're not prepared to take on the bureaucratic paperwork that Liz handles to manage these grants. You know, so I think the key word here is cooperative. This is a bunch of municipalities cooperating together, and Liz is really the conduit to help manage that paperwork. If there's no CVAC in this, if we and other municipalities don't go and opt for the adder and CVAC were to go under, then we're having to now manage the paperwork for these electric photovoltaic endeavors and wind endeavors that we've engaged in, and that's not something the business office or I want to take on.
I don't have any objection to us doing this. It's just that if we could in the future, be sure to get you on the agenda so we can vote and then go through our normal procedure. I don't know.
Maybe Sharon wants to do it next month or 2 weeks.
Well, it would, because that's our usual procedure, but otherwise I have no problem with what people are saying.
We got Liz on to the first meeting we possibly could from when we
If
got the
it's-
information.
I mean, it's really critical.
Karen?
I would, and Sharon has a good point, but I would think in this operation, most especially seeing we've been involved for over a year, that there are going to be occasions in which information is given to us in an evening, and if it's understood by all of us, and it's agreed, it allows the exception of the vote. I think it should allow a vote to be taken based on the need. So I'm very comfortable after listening to her and reviewing this, that it's in our best interest.
I would agree with Terry, except that I would like a little more time to understand it better. I don't understand it all that well, but I do have a specific question. On your presentation, you have the NMC used in calculations of 0.159 will adjust up or down over the life of the project with a net rise expected as the cost of electricity is expected to rise. What if the cost of electricity actually decreases? Mine did recently.
And it could. So there's enough of a protection. For instance, when we created our pro formas and I first came to you, they were built on a net metering credit value of 14 cents. Over the winter, it went up to 19 cents. But we haven't, because the price of electricity went up. We didn't use that. We're using what it is now, which is 15.9. What it would take for the price of electricity to go down it would have to drastically drop, because there's a couple of pennies worth of difference. We would have to convert to entire nuclear power, or we'd have to have a new technology. For instance, this whole natural gas influx, that's not going to solve our problem. So we can never state unilaterally that the price of electricity won't go down to, well, right now it's about 16 cents, that it would go down to 10 cents. We have to leave that as a possibility.
But my question is, if it does not rise, if it actually decreases, would you decrease correspondingly, knowing that you not to the 14.4?
No, because
Not at all.
we've done all of our pro formas based on a bottom line net metering credit value. And everything beyond that, when we first came to everybody, was 12 cents. And it still worked. It worked great. It has gone up since then to 19 cents. Now, it's true it dropped down to 16 cents over this summer, but it will, pretty confident it's gonna go back up this winter. So that 12-cent pro forma was the risk. When we built the projects and we went to the towns at the outset in 2010 and 2011, all of it was built on a net metering credit value of 12 cents. But we have to always put out the caveat. Something amazing could happen where electricity is free. And yes, then these deals won't work. There is that risk, but we think that we have a great degree of confidence that's not going to happen.
That part we've already agreed to.
You're kind of in for that, yeah. You've agreed that the basic premise of the deal is a good one, and you've made. I have some financials here, but you've made a great deal of money this year, because even just with what we've seen has provided you a good deal of income.
Yeah, I haven't been on the board that long, so.
We
So
can tell you.
the original pro formas I can
Yeah.
see.
So over the course of this winter, meaning that your project started last June and they've really come online over the course of the winter, and our last ones are still not delivering you guys your off-taker yet. So we still have more projects that will bring you more revenue, but you had cleared $15,000 for nothing, just as a participant, as an off-taker.
Any other questions? So we have a motion and a second to agree in concept with the 1 penny per kilowatt hour increase. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It passes. You abstain? One abstention.
Very good, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your juice.
Your juice. Next on reports and discussions is strategic plan subcommittee formation and guidelines. I stomped all over Robert's rules at our last meeting, and I proceeded without fully having a vetted conversation amongst the committee before forming said subcommittee. So Sharon is the person who was looking for not necessarily agreeing with the process that was happening. I would like Sharon to state her position again, and then the rest of the committee may make comments on what their feelings are.
Okay. The document that exists, in substance, especially this part here, the goals, not so much this, I don't really have any disagreement in substance, but my position is that I think the opportunity is amazing for us to go to the community, since we are in our second year, and ask the community, community meaning administrators, teachers, parents, community members, to come together and do some brainstorming on where they see where Monomoy is now, where they'd like to see us go, strengths, weaknesses. I do see that we have in our packet some things about a survey from parents. And I just see it as such a fabulous opportunity to bring in the community of all these people together to feel a part of things and to actually be a part of things. And that's all. It's not against anything, it's just, I think we could benefit so much.
Comments?
There was also some discussion, I believe, about possibility of creating a strategic planning subcommittee based on what we had seen on the DESE website and what other schools have done to implement the strategic planning process. And I thought it was a good idea to have a strategic planning subcommittee. I don't know what anybody else thinks, in order to get the input of everyone in the community. As Sharon said, parents, teachers, administrators, alumni, students, anyone that's interested in our school system, which hopefully will be everybody in the community.
Terry?
Just a different twist on this. I don't have any disagreement with Sharon's idea about inclusion and bringing in the community as a whole and having brainstorming sessions. As a matter of fact, I think that's, as I read this 2 or 3 weeks ago, that's in the plan. And I also think that, and this is a very brief kicking the idea around, it is such a critical step that we take from the first strategic plan that created this building and the staffing structure coming together. So this is kind of phase 2. So it does require a great deal of effort on all of our part to make this work and to have it come out to be something that is clear and simple. My suggestion, rather than have a subcommittee, I would suggest that we have a strategic planning committee of the whole, all of us. And as every meeting that we attend as a school committee, or every other, we have an agenda item that is an update for the leadership team, specifically with Scott and anyone else that would come forward to share with us the progress. In addition to that, I think it would be wise for us, as far as having 8 of us, that I would say every 3 months or every 2 months, we have a specified workshop in the evening or the afternoon or the morning with all of us, with one topic, and that is the progress of the strategic plan. And that would become our input and our fine-tuning of it. Along the way, my feeling on this, because we've hired a leadership team, starting with our superintendent and central office and principals, to begin to crystallize their ideas and bring it forward in the form of, in this case, this, which I'm impressed with, And then from this framework, enlist all of our staff voluntarily to come and join and get familiar with this. And all of the PTOs, if they exist, in all of the 4 schools, and then the greater community. But to have something that those members who are living their lives have something to flesh out. To say, now Sharon, you said you don't have any major jump outs regarding these bullets. What on earth is that doing here? Nor do I. And so I'd say we're off to a good start as foundation builders. And I think rather than have another subcommittee, which I've experienced the last couple of years being on the building committee and the evaluation of the superintendent committee, at that time, to then we translate back into our membership and how often it is that no one reports out. And so if we have the time and commitment, I would suggest that if we're looking at how one approaches this, because unlike many of those districts, Karen, that I think that you looked up, which I credit you, I wouldn't even be able to begin to research all of those cities. But the largest cities, they hire through a grant, a leader, to bring that staff through a strategic plan for serious money, which we don't have. And so my thought, we relying on those people who are not free, but are available to us as professional staff, starting with the central office. And by building in a regular agenda uptake, by building in workshops that allow us to continue just on that one topic, I think we really would be informed as to the progress of it and also be able to include the community as we move forward in the next 6 months. So that's my thought. And it's nothing earth-shattering, but I think that would be my first way to approach this major task.
As far as the research that I did on other schools and what they had done for, what they had used for a process, only 2 of them in that list that I went through, and I think there were 15 or somewhere between 15 and 20 that I looked at. Only 2 of them used consultants or consulting firms, Some of the ones that I found that had the very best, in my opinion, very inclusive, very thorough goals and a strategic plan, were the ones that seemed to have used a subcommittee or some sort of committee which included people from all areas of the community right from the very close to the beginning, if not the very beginning. Those were the ones that really impressed me the most. We have a document to start with, and I'm certainly not advocating that we throw it out and start again, but I would like to include community members in the process starting right now. My only concern with having the entire, when you say us or we, I guess you're speaking of the committee, just the school committee, or were you speaking of the school committee and others? I wasn't clear.
Initially, I'm thinking committee of a whole, all of us, this school committee.
Just the committee?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have objections to that, except in the sense that it can be difficult for us to, I don't know, have progress and move things forward. I don't want to exclude anybody. Anybody that would like to be involved in it, I think, should be.
Well, Karen, I haven't really plugged this out beyond did Tom Brady get released from his 4 suspensions, but that can evolve. In other words, so we have had our leadership team in July launches. So my next thought would be, how do we begin to start to move this forward? So my first thought would be, rather than begin to start to bring in 4 or 5 people to bring them through the community, let us begin to launch it as a committee in the next couple of months, relying on our superintendent and his central office and principal staff to flesh out the next step. The next step would be faculty involvement. I'm making this up. Faculty involvement in all schools, evening meetings with the PTOs, evening meetings with the community at large, selected members of the community that would not be included in what I've just said. And out of that would come input. Now, along the way, maybe we would discover that we would need 2 or 3 more members to join us on that. So I wouldn't preclude it, but at least to start, I would try to keep it focused within ourselves.
My concern would be that.
Did we let other people?
Sorry.
put their input in, please.
I didn't realize someone else was.
Somebody had to say something. No, I actually have a thought. The only question I would have about what you're suggesting is, there needs to be a leader. There needs to be somebody who is the manager of what's going on. And I'm assuming you're talking about Scott.
Precisely.
So is there currently, as it stands right now, or as it stood before the last meeting, was there a defined plan for, what meetings were going to take place when and involving who? I mean, is there an existing structure?
Unfortunately, we did not let Superintendent Carpenter finish his presentation last time. We jumped in and didn't let him finish, and he didn't have the opportunity to fully explain what the process was going to be. My fault. But he did start off saying that he and his administrative staff, and he talked about this back in June with us, were starting the process, and they were going to be putting the draft together. They came to us in a special meeting, presented the draft, and all through this process, the conversation was that they were going to bring it to the teachers, bring it to the families, bring it to the community at large. So, yes, the superintendent was managing that process. And it was very open and upfront with it June, July, and August when he talked to us.
The first I recall of it was when we met for our workshop. And I don't remember, it could have been said that there was going to be a strategic plan or something, but nothing came up. The school committee didn't approve anything. And then it happened, and at that point, some wonderful work was done. But then it came to us, and so it was a very awkward thing. I mean, I felt very awkward last meeting, bringing up in the middle of Scott's presentation. I was trying to think, well, when is a good time to go through this whole thing and then bring it up? And it didn't occur to me ahead of time, any of this. So it just was very awkward. The whole thing was awkward. But I think it's a difference. I think we have differences as a committee in how much we want to involve the community in this and how much of an opportunity we think we can learn from the community. All of us, I think, are in agreement that we have a wonderful administrative staff and they've done some wonderful work on this. When we go forward with this already done, then the only feedback is really about this that's already been done. And what I'm looking for from the community is things we haven't even thought about. And I don't mean for them to tell us how to teach math. I don't mean that at all. I'm just saying, as I said before, where does the community see us as Monomoy? Or don't they see us? Those type of things.
And as in our conversation in our August meeting, we contributed 12 action steps to what they had already done, based upon just our conversation,
Right.
which were incorporated into it.
Yes.
And those steps going forward with the staff, with families, with community members, they all get incorporated into the action steps. That's the purpose of it. You have to have a step-off point. You can't have a totally blank slate when you have the presentations to the community. Karen.
I wanted to follow up with something that Sharon said. I wasn't aware either before the workshop that we had that we would be presented with a draft and then commenting on an already existing draft. I guess what I wasn't aware of was that we had charged our superintendent and administrative team with creating and then leading the creation and refinements of this document. That's what I wasn't aware of. We came to the workshop and this was presented to us and we made some comments and most were incorporated. And then it was to be moved forward, but did I miss the part where we had charged the administrative and team and superintendent with leading this?
I don't know if there was a formal charge by the school committee. Nancy?
I vaguely remember towards the end of the summer, Mr. Carpenter coming and saying that this is a plan that he was going to do, something, to pull up the tapes of the meetings, but I remember them discussing how the administration team was going to get together and almost come about this in a different way, because I do remember him saying that he was going to be starting a strategic plan. It may not have been using the same word, strategic plan, but I remember the conversations happening, saying that he's going to be getting together with the administrative team to come up with, and that it was going to be coming to us over the summer during our workshop. I don't remember what that technically was called, but our workshop meeting, and that it was going to be going out to the faculty and the parents and the community members. And I actually appreciate a rough draft of a plan going out to the community members and the parents as a whole, because if you look at how other strategic plans have happened, it's always been a select group of people. And it seems like this will be more widespread amongst the community members. If, you know, say at a parent meeting, I'm going to be presenting a draft strategic plan for anybody to come. Whereas the other strategic plan committees, it was limited to a certain number of members that were either invited specifically because they were members of the community who have expressed interest, or the select few that have actually put their name in. So I like the fact that it would be open to the public versus a closed group, more so. And I also do appreciate a starting point to go out to those public meetings. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for a closed group, and I hope it didn't come out that way, because I wasn't at all. I mean, I agree with you.
No, I just mean the past strategic plan groups, the one that happened 4 years ago, 3 years ago. It was you can't invite as many people who want to come. It has to have some sort of limit. And the one that happened 4 years ago, there was a limit, and there was specific invitations that were mailed to people, to certain people to say, are you interested in coming, if I remember correctly. And so that to me is, I don't like that as well. That's just my personal opinion.
I would agree with you. I guess I was more envisioning having focus groups, you know, just a survey or surveys and focus groups, and gathering all those results and incorporating them into this. But making sure that we did it more starting now and got the voices from all of these different groups in the beginning in order to incorporate what they have to say in here. Everybody has a different point of view. This is reflective of the administration's point of view, and I'm just concerned we'd be missing out on others that would be equally valid. That would be my concern. As far as how we get there specifically, I'm not sure. I guess that's what we're discussing right now.
So, I mean, some of the things that are in here are emphasizing closed reading, reverse engineering math curriculum, create horizontal and vertical curriculum, leveraging technology and community resources. There's a whole bunch of different things that bring it, like the one that I had been originally referring to was not, I think we're all in agreement that last one was done a couple of years ago was really, I use the term dead. It wasn't a good example of a good strategic plan. The one prior to that, about 10 years ago, was an example where they went out to the garden club, they went out to each church, they went out to all these groups, and they asked for, if somebody was, somebody from the group was specially interested or knowledgeable in education. And they came and they represented all these groups everywhere, so it was pretty well done. But these kind of things here, you're not going to, for a lot of them, get garden club members or even a teacher that's been retired 10 years to say something about closed reading because they don't know anything about it. So there are a lot of things in here that it's not going to, hardly any parents will know to respond about these particular things. Not everything in here, but many things. What my hope was to get information that parents and community members had for us that are not particularly included in here that might be very valuable to us. There are other ways besides the strategic plan, but that's one way that I've seen it done before. And we've been surprised, very happily surprised with information that we haven't thought of. That's all.
If I,
Brian?
Well, I understand the idea that, you can't expect an average person off the street to be able to understand what closed reading and writing from sources kind of thing is. But I think that's actually a reason to invite the public, because with something like this, it's a two-way street. Not only will we get input from them, but provide information to them. So it's an opportunity for a parent or a teacher or a community member to say, well, what is this? And have it explained to them at an early stage so that they can give their opinion as to whether this is a worthwhile thing to do. I don't think something like this is going to make people feel that they can't provide input. But I think it should be both ways. The people who put this together can explain what this is to parents and community members, and then seek their ideas. I mean, there's nothing that keeps anybody at a meeting, at a public meeting, there's nothing that keeps anybody who's there from saying, well, what about this? And bringing up a topic that has nothing to do with what's on there. If it's open to the public, it's open to the public for all ideas. I think it's a win-win. There's no harm in having this as a basic structure and then asking people to comment on this or comment freely on whatever else is on their mind.
Okay. Oh, maybe you haven't had a chance to voice in yet.
I guess I don't see this so much as an either or, but a yes and. I think that this is fine work that's been done here in the strategic plan, and I think that in our new district and with new administrators, I think that it's important that they have some structure to work from, and it's timely in that sense as well. But I also do think that as I mentioned at the last meeting, I was part of the strategic planning that Sharon's referring to. And it was very different and outside the box than perhaps the one that happened 4 years ago. I can't speak to it because I wasn't part of that. But it did allow for a lot of collaboration. And where I think this is a great document, and I don't have any problem with us moving forward with this, I don't see this so much as a starting point. I do not see it as it having a lot of room for collaboration. But that being said, maybe instead of trying to fit the strategic plan into this idea of, what we're talking about, that session that we had 9 years ago, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for us to do something outside the box that involves the community in a real way, not just, and I'm not saying that this would be, present.
That's it, folks.
Yeah.
Did you pay the electric bill?
I just would hate, I do think that there's an opportunity here, and I do think that there needs to be some healing and some generating of enthusiasm in our community. opportunities. And I'd like to see us address that in some creative way, whether it is in working out the strategic plan and inviting their ideas and inviting them to collaborate with us, or if it's something else. I'm not quite sure, but
Terry, you had a comment?
I agree with him. I don't know if our verbiage is just getting confused amongst what really we're about to try to launch, and whether or not some folks think B should have come before A or A before B. It doesn't seem to be, one mentions that, yes, this was the administrative and principals first shot for 5 or 6 days during the summer. I say to myself, what better group to start with? You know, Sharon, you mentioned moms and dads who will invite in the next month or two and they see close reading. They may not very well know the impact. Was I close on that?
Close reading.
That even, forget a mother and dad, a retired educator.
Right.
So they won't be able to contribute to that point, but I think and I think Brian mentioned it, once we begin to involve the variety of the public, there's a give and take of where they leave feeling knowledgeable far more than they give. How often we attend a meeting that we leave thinking that we're the one presenting and we feel we gain more out of it. So myself, and I don't think I'm really, it's not a revolutionary thought about where does one begin a process like this, but if we have a leadership team that we've screened and hired, and we've charged them, whether or not all of us weren't there when we mandated a vote that say, let's launch this strategic plan. I believe who else would be doing that? Who else would we invite to start that process? My son and his wife, they plan to take kids to Washington, D.C. So as a strategic little committee, they got together before they included the kids and looked at their budget and looked at their Visa card and looked at the route and looked at hotels and other accommodations that might have happened to be made. And then at that point, they brought in these kids and said, guess what? We'd like to do this. And some of the kids said, well, what about the Spy Museum in Washington? Is that included? And maybe it wasn't. So that little simple model applies here also, that we generate a launching pad, and very well said as far as your point. How do we begin to get the groups that we have not yet started to include to come in and start to buy and have ownership in it? And that's going to be the skill of the superintendent and his leadership group. And as Steve said, we didn't give him the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to say, step one would be this, and then the next 3 or 6 weeks we plan to involve this as far as getting input in surveys. You know, just after this discussion 2 weeks ago, Scott probably was going to, but didn't have an opportunity, but he presented this DESE expectations regarding strategic planning. Very, very appropriate. It says, included in the superintendent evaluation rubric is, quote, a proficient superintendent develops core values that guide development of a succinct, results-oriented mission statement and ongoing decision-making. At all grade levels, continuously engages administrative staff, students, families, community members in developing a vision focused on student preparation for college and a career readiness, civic engagement, community contributions. The operative word is develop. Taken together, superintendent develops strategic plans, which are approved by school committees. School committees, in turn, evaluate the superintendent on both the development and the implementation of the strategic plan. Simple steps. So we either unconsciously or some of us felt it was time to start, we've launched that model. Now we'll give the superintendent and his leadership team, with our input the next couple of weeks, to plot out that next new trip leading to the strategic plan. So I don't know if we need a motion to affirm where we've come from, Mr. Chair, but I think we've given this enough discussion to get ourselves launched in an appropriate way.
The document that you're referring to is one that was sent to us by Steve, and I had actually written, our chair, I had written him back saying that this document does say certain things, but there was some other information that said something different. Had I known this was to be presented, I would have brought what I had sent back to Steve that indicated that the school committee had a pretty substantial role in this. I guess I would just like to make sure that the school committee has a say throughout the entire process to make sure that we have this community involvement and collaboration that Amy was speaking so eloquently about more than I am. And not just that the administrative team would be just reporting to us, but that we'd be more involved in the process of ensuring that we have all this collaboration.
Well, that would seem to lead back to the idea that Scott would present, either finish his previous presentation, or at some point, maybe at the next meeting, present to us what the current proposal is for what's going to happen next, and what order, and who's going to be doing what. And then it is ultimately our strategic plan as a school committee. So if we serve, with Terry's idea that we serve as an entire committee, as a strategic planning committee, it is consistent with the idea that it's our strategic plan. So if Scott was to make a presentation next time as to what the proposed plan is, we would have the ability to say, no, we think you should do it this way, or we think you should do it in that order, but it would ultimately be our position to approve the proposed, not the whole plan, but the procedural plan. So that's what I would propose that we do. I don't know if we need a motion for that, but I think it accomplishes everything everybody wants to accomplish. We have oversight over it, but at the same time, we let them start off with what they think should be the procedure.
Nancy, Anna first.
Can you give us a brief synopsis of what your plan was without going through the slide deck? I mean,
Sure.
just what was your plan after you presented to us?
I feel like the elephant in the room.
You can talk just for a couple minutes.
I guess what we were hoping to do was
Your intention
was get, have buy-in from this group, that we move forward with a draft to share with the, with the greater community. And so the slide deck, that I had provided actually was pictures from a web posting that I had hoped I could just go boom up before the start of the school year, which was sort of providing, just in terms of just what I wanted to try to do to educate people on why you have strategy, but it was just, sort of for the superintendent's website, thoughts on strategic planning, leveraging school improvement, and soliciting input from staff, parents, and the community. So the sort of main topics, what does it mean to leverage school improvement? How do we go about focusing on specific things that will have bang for the buck? That we're not trying to say, I want to improve the education at the elementary school. Well, like, be more specific. How are we going to hit there? And then the next section was moving beyond strategy, or moving beyond a strategy for regionalization, because that's where we left off. And I just kind of give a brief history of that, and then developing strategy focused upon improving student learning, which is really what the state's website is. The planning for success. The state's really pushing the districts. You want to have a strategy that if you don't have a keel on the ship, it's not going to go the direction you want it to head. There's a reason why the superintendent's evaluation rubric has that the superintendent is supposed to be developing this vision, this strategy, and which is why at the end of last year I was sort of leaving off with, we've accomplished the regionalization. It's now time to start looking at how we launch forward. And then the last part of it is incorporating the voices of our schools and community, which is really that, it's me specifically saying, here's how you can go, a series of meetings that we would have, at each of the schools with the staff, but also a series of parent forums and community forums. And I think, I think the important thing to not lose sight of is I agree with those that want to see this be a community process. And I just want, I was doing some research on the strategic plan. I'm happy to, if you all want a copy of the plan that I think Amy is referring to and Sharon was referring to from Chatham, the plan before the regionalization plan. They used a process. So it's a specific way to get community members together, and the process is called Future Search. And there are facilitators that come in, and the reality behind, even if the school district, it looks like they developed it themselves, most school districts have a pretty extensive budget that will go in behind some of these strategic planning. So the strategic planning document that came out of it, they had about a $40,000 price tag to the town of Chatham. And it was, about a little over half of that was the facilitator, and the rest of that was the food that we're buying at Chatham Mars Inn. I'm not sure
That was the controller there.
Okay. But it was, at least when I'm talking with our business office, it had a rather expensive price tag to the whole thing. I think the worry that I had looking both at how that search or how that strategic process was done and how the past one was done is that it involved a set of voices. It involved 60 or 80 people in both of the last two. And how do we get more than 60 or 80 people to hear the plan, to see it, to provide input, to learn what does it mean? And so we were trying to go through this. How do we get more voices into it? And I think some of the challenges with the way, if you do a true future search process, it's getting people to commit for 3 days to go sit in a room, and they intentionally in the future search process, they want you to sleep on things for two separate nights to go through that. And that's tough to get a lot of people to go and commit to that. So it's that balance between fewer people, long period of time, lots of people, short, maybe it's lots of people for an afternoon. So the thought here is let's see if we can go have a draft that we can have people give feedback upon, and take that feedback, and then we can radiate out and actually use a future search type of approach for that next step. And I circled from that future search process. They talk about how you could use the process, which was I think the way Chatham did 2 go-rounds ago, where they started from scratch. But the other way that you can use that same sort of process is you can use it to go and develop the action steps. And the key for Chatham's plan is, they ultimately came up with 194 action steps to go and accomplish this plan. And I would argue that that page 1 is the draft strategic plan, and the admin team was starting to flesh out some action steps that we thought needed to be incorporated into the first, second, third, and fourth columns. And now clearly this isn't 100 or so bullets per column, but that's ultimately what I think starts. You start when you bring in those other voices. It's sitting down with teachers and parents and educating them on what is close reading and how do we achieve that goal. And one of the things that I ultimately want to see that that wasn't necessarily in the Chatham document is they nicely set out for the 194 action items, sort of year one, year two as a 5-year plan, what they wanted to hit over the course of those 5 years. But I think it's really important to really be clear, what are the outcomes that you want to see? How do you know, and if I channel Lou Urbano, it's like, how are you going to measure? And I think it's a fair question to flesh out in the meetings that you're having with everyone is how do we accomplish these things? What do we need to do? If this is, I think it's almost a 2-step process. You need to first get feedback, radiate it out beyond the school committee and the admin team on what are the important levers that we should be trying to pull. When we get that pulled in and get sort of the final draft of the plan, there's this next round to pull people in on how do you develop the action step process, and that was one of the things that I was sharing with the group. It's one thing to develop, here are the things we want to work on. Now we need to go and come up with a way to actually achieve this, and that's identifying, in this case, the 194 action items to get from A to Z. And I think if you use the logic model that they refer to in the book that we were using, the strategy in action, to make sure that you identify who's responsible for it. What resources does the school committee and administration need to be putting into the budget next year and the year after to achieve it? What are the outcomes that you expect to see? And so I think that in many ways we're getting hung up on process, and there's 2 ways to go about it. It's you start from scratch and you just kind of, and that's the way I think Chatham launched into this back in 2006. The other way to go about it is to start with a draft and say, hey, first of all, is this, are we hitting everything that we want to hit in the draft? And then launch into a process of really identifying how do we move from these items and actually make it happen, and get the buy-in from everyone on making sure that these are the action steps to get from A to Z.
Sure.
So the things that you're saying, I see as very appropriate for going to the teachers. But overall, besides this and besides educating people on this, I'd like to see another feedback thing that would say, where do you see Monomoy now? Where would you like to see us go? What other thoughts do you have for us? That would be more open-ended, so we could value, not treat the community like they were kids, that we're making a decision on everything and they get to make their little points or something later. But I think there's value. I think there's huge value from that. And this has huge value too. I just don't want people to fall asleep with it, because I don't think the teachers will. But beyond that, I don't know how many people are going to identify, and being, it's kind of like if you want to tell me blow by blow about things about football. I could hold with you for a while, but I wouldn't be good for a long term. But if you could ask me, what I thought was about sports in general or something, I'd have a lot more interest.
Karen?
To Brian's point, I was fine with everything you said. I think that's a great idea. What I would request is that we have something in writing 48 hours, just like we get the minutes from the last meeting and the agenda before our school committee meetings, that we have something that gives us concisely what is going to happen in the process, where we are, what has happened between the last meeting and the one that we will be attending, that 48 hours from there, so that we have a chance to look at it. I find it difficult to have documents presented in front of us in a meeting, whether it be a slideshow or a paper packet, without having some time to look at them beforehand. That would be my request. As to what Sharon said, is there a way that we can use the document and ask for open-ended input and do both?
Well, this document was sent to us prior to that last meeting.
No, I'm not asking for that. I'm asking
But-
for what Scott was going to present that we didn't get through last time. I'd like to see
I
that
think
before.
most of the time, those kind of presentations are put together at the last minute. They're not done Friday before our meeting. And that's why we have the rule not to act on things until the second meeting, which we try to live by most of the time, to allow people time to really look at the documentation and ask questions.
So,
So most of the time, what's being presented here, we get the Friday before, by and large. There are times like the presentation tonight by CVAC,
yep.
you know, and it just can't guarantee that we'll have them.
In that particular case of Scott's presentation at our last meeting, I didn't realize that it was something that we would be able to take an action on at the following meeting. It was something that was, I believe, under the item of superintendent's report, and usually that's reported to us, and then we don't take an action item, or we
But
don't.
it's that
we don't-
informational.
Yeah, it's just informational, exactly, and we don't have input on it. So that's what I thought it was. So if it's something that's presented to us and we don't have it 48 hours before our meeting, that's fine, as long as it's an action item that we take action on at the following meeting. So we still have that chance to look at it.
Which is
So either way,
it's our general rule of thumb, is
Okay,
that we
maybe-
do not take action on a presentation the same night.
I guess it was just the fact that it was under superintendent's report on the agenda item as opposed to being listed under,
What's the discussions?
yes, thank you.
Well, that's why we have action items, things we need to vote on, which is a separate agenda item.
So if we move forward with the process that Brian had outlined, it seems like maybe we could agree on that, I'm not sure, we'll see. Then we would be informed as to what had happened and what was going to happen, and then that would be an action item to vote on the following meeting. Then we,
Amy had her hand up before.
sorry.
I just was going to, in thinking about just a couple things, and this has less to do with the process, but again, more about the community piece. I hear what Sharon's saying, in that, I mean, how do you make a document like, how do you get people invested in something like this? And I mean, maybe it's a matter of these strategic objectives are divided, you know, we have the 4 different strategic objectives, and people are going to learn about that objective that is most interesting to them, or what they're most called to. I mean, that's another aside. We can talk about how to creatively present this to the community, and I would hope that we would do it in a creative way. But the other piece of it is there were a lot of things that were great about that future search that you referred to, and certainly the food and the surroundings of Chatham Bars Inn were nice, and I'm not at all surprised it came at a very large price tag. But in remembering it, the most powerful thing that happened in those 2, I remember it being 2 days, but maybe it was 3 days. But the most powerful thing that happened was those 60 to 80 people sat around in a circle at the very end, and each person had to say how they were going to invest themselves in the school, specifically to make that strategic plan happen. And it was a very powerful thing, and it made people commit and invest in our schools in a way that was tangible and specific. And so it was a real great thing, and I just wanted to mention that.
Steve, going back to Karen's point, which I agree with Karen, one thing we forget though as a committee, we're all, it's 1 year or 3 months or 5 years, we're all brand new. And we're learning as we're going along. So this thing is under construction like a railroad car, and we're making decisions as we pass these stations. But what I found it advantageous in a lot of these issues, not necessarily strategic plan, as we move along, and you're right, if we don't have Friday information enough to begin to come with some thoughts on our own, then yes, the way it's processed, there is no action votes, and you have a chance to chew over it and follow up with questions, even with superintendent's report. However, beyond that, and this goes, I guess, for all of us, and I'm taking advantage of it, if there's something that's brought up here that you're really in disagreement with, but really you don't have the input yet to really present, I would suggest that you individually call the chairman or the superintendent of schools and have a one-on-one or a principal based on a presentation that you just didn't get it or I didn't get it prior to, because what it could do is save us school committee time. So that we're not just dialoguing here, when in fact, now, it would require a commitment on our part that it's more than just a 2-hour once every 2 weeks, that there are gonna be issues that you probably would have to call Scott up and ask to have an appointment with him for an hour or 40 minutes to iron out some thoughts, seeing that he's working 50 hours and I'm working an hour a week. So that way there, you might, or I have walked away saying, I kind of understand the logic. So it's, I offer that just to reinforce why I've had that experience, and the rest of us could avail ourselves of that too.
Any more discussion? Okay. Next on the agenda is the 2015-2016 school committee goals and workshop. We had said that we would, at this first meeting, try to come up with a date and time that we can all agree upon to have this meeting. I don't know if it's possible for people to do it on a Saturday morning, which frees up some of the people that are tied up in the evenings. Just throwing that out there. Or do we want to just look for an off Wednesday night from school committee to plan the workshop?
I vote for Saturday morning. Saturday morning is better for me. Definitely.
Saturday's out.
Hmm?
Saturday's out.
You're working.
Well, I mean, it depends on when I get out of the hospital, but yeah. On
Yeah.
most Saturdays I'll be working.
Sharon, your thoughts?
I could do either one.
Wednesday nights are really tough for me, actually. Any school night, but Thursday nights are a good night for me. My son's with his father, if that works for anybody else.
Those nights look good for
I'm fine.
You have something.
Nancy's saying,
I have to ask him.
Saturday morning, I'm at the beach.
Saturday mornings I'm at the beach still. Evenings are good for me.
So,
As long as we plan it out.
how far out do you need to go?
Well,
A month?
What's
3
the-
weeks would
So what's the first?
3 weeks.
That would go to October 1st. That's getting out there. Any possibility for the 24th?
20. I'm already booked from 3 to 7.
All right, so what are people's October 1st like, look like?
I gotta be at the airport that night, picking up somebody for the wedding.
Ooh,
It's the
yeah.
next day.
Not good.
Who's getting married?
My daughter.
I didn't get my invitation yet.
Wonderful. Great.
Lost email.
I will definitely be at the airport.
Is the 30th the school committee night? Oh, no, that's not good.
23rd is the school committee meeting.
The 30th is curriculum night for the middle school.
Okay. Well, let's go back. How about the 17th
Of?
I can't do
September? I can't do the 1st.
Well, I could probably cancel what I have on the 17th if that works for everybody else.
Say that again?
I could probably cancel what I have on the 17th if that works for everybody else.
Why don't you look into it and send me an email, and I will send an email out to everybody else. Everybody else look good on the 17th? Okay.
What invite Brian.
Are you bad?
Who couldn't do the 24th?
Chair was busy until 7 PM.
I mean, I have to cancel a lot of clients.
Oh, I don't even do that.
No.
I'm sure I did this.
I mean, I'd like to try to do this, keep it to a,
Starting at what time do we suppose?
Will there be food?
Inexpensive food.
granola bars.
I need to know about better for dinner.
Is a 6 o'clock starting time workable for you? Or is it better 7?
No, it's just, yes, I can, it's my husband's birthday, so I need to
You'll have
be
another
sure
one.
to, I'll just have to make sure he has somebody else to go out with
Is it a
Thursday
big
night,
one?
then we'll be good. It is a fairly large for what,
You're not gonna celebrate it Saturday?
we'll be doing it as well, on the beach.
Okay.
17th is fine, I'm just time, I just, time, that's all I was asking. I'm not
Well,
reneging on my
Why don't we
17th.
cut it to the 6th?
So it's a pizza dinner, right?
That'd be
That's a
fun, right?
pizza meeting? Anybody say pizza yet?
Pizza's good.
No. It's just easy.
17th at,
October 8th, is it clear for people? October 8th? Thursday night?
the 17th was good.
October 8th is
17th
awesome.
was good with everybody, wasn't it?
I thought you
No,
were.
well, yeah, it'll be fine.
The 8th is perfect. You don't have any appointments yet?
If we can wait till then, that's fine.
Scott?
All right, let's set it-
17th is a building committee meeting. At
At night?
5 o'clock on the 17th.
Put by 6.
That's
I'll
six
hold you.
over here.
What's that?
17th, the building committee?
Put by 6, hopefully we're ready
Just to turn page.
to roll into the next meeting.
17th is fine. I'll find somebody else to send them that way.
Don't you find somebody else?
So that's the building committee meeting ending or starting at 5.
And then we'll roll into the next one.
Yeah.
What time's the building meeting?
5.
It's done by,
We should be done by 6.
okay. So, October 8th, 6 PM.
Wait, October, we back on
Maybe it's
Oh,
September 7th.
September 17th, sorry.
at 6 PM here?
Well, that's if Karen can
Yeah.
cancel the thing.
I can cancel it.
It's- She already had something planned, so, all right. She's gonna email me whether she can do it, and I will send an email out to everyone else.
Mr. Chair, would it be prudent to save some time if either some of us or the superintendent could gather some generic school committee goals, whether it's throughout the Commonwealth, so that, and then we get them in advance, so that we have a page or two to kind of generate our own ideas, but also something would trigger it. And then come to that meeting, again, not with a blank sheet, but with some ideas.
I remember when we met in your office like 2 years ago or something. We came with our own ideas or not, and just brainstormed or something. I thought that worked out really well.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Is this happening here? Or will you let us know?
We'll have it in the large conference room, presuming it's available.
Okay.
But here.
Principal's
Right.
office.
Yeah.
Or
Out here.
administration.
High school.
Same place as last year, Sharon.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, subcommittee reports. We did have a finance subcommittee last Thursday where we discussed a draft memorandum of understanding with the Harvard Selectmen, which we found that we agreed with their theory, but not necessarily with the full document. And Mr. Whittegren will give you a quick rundown about our discussion.
He will?
Well, I included the
Right, in your packet is the draft plan that was sent to us by,
Thing that says draft, big letters. The Howard Selectmen, and finance committee, I would say, to want to try to get the school department, school committee in the district to try to come up with a plan which will allow for a more consistent budgeting process. The idea being that we would reach an understanding in writing that's as it's stated on here, that we would agree that, you know, that we would try to come up with a percentage by which the school department's budget would not increase in any given year within a certain range. And I'm not going to go into all the details yet because it's an extremely rough draft. And as is our policy, we'll be having a very short discussion about this tonight, and we'll discuss it in full at our next meeting after everybody's had a chance to look at it. But as far as a report of the subcommittee went, I think it's fair to say that as a finance committee, as a school subcommittee of finance people, we felt that the concept is good. It benefits both sides to be able to come up with a plan which allows them to plan ahead and allows us to plan ahead, you know, sort of along the lines of what each town's capital outlay committee does. You know, the capital outlay committees or each town come up with a long-term plan for large capital projects, usually over $100,000, for example, and they space them out in such a way that there's no one year in which there's a huge tax increase to pay for a construction project, and have one coming offline as another one comes on. So a long-term planning process, and then the selectmen want to apply that to budgeting, that we would come to an understanding that if we figure that we're going to have a 5-year plan in which we anticipate what our needs are going to be for 5 years, what sort of average amount can we raise the budget by every year in order to have that be consistent, which benefits both sides, as I said, because then the taxpayers can plan ahead for how our budget's going to, our budget being something like 60% of the town budget, how it's going to affect their planning, and we can perhaps not go through some of the horrible disputes that we've dealt with in the last few years in terms of trying to come up with a budget that everybody can agree on. And the concept makes perfect sense. But we discussed the fact that there are certain problems with it that are inherent in anything like that. Among them are that we are the current school committee, and we can't speak for future school committees. Some of us won't be on the school committee. If we come up with a 5-year plan, I would say probably most of us won't be on the school committee in 5 years, and we can't bind those people. That's inherent in this. It's inherent in the town side as well. The selectmen might agree to something like this, and then 3 years from now, there'll be all different selectmen who'll think that was a crazy thing, we're never going to go along with that. So that's something that's inherently a problem with it. But as a concept to show good faith and do an attempt to plan, I think we thought it was a good idea. But it needs a lot of work in order to come up with, to be drafted in such a way that it's less likely that future town officials or future school officials would have a problem with it. Maybe they would address it as, thank goodness you solved that problem for us. You know, we can deal with strategic plans and things like that. So I think it's a work in progress. I think the concept is something that we can support, but I think we have a long way to go. First of all, in dealing with Harwich Plus, there's been, as far as I know, there's been no discussion with Chatham, and their selectmen and finance committee on the same principle. So that's my idea of brief, and we can talk about it more the next time. Right. And I would invite anybody else who was there to supplement.
I would just add the point that it's a challenge. Again, I agree that it has merit. The challenge is that here we are in early September, committing in writing, if that were our intentions, to stay within a certain percentage, not only for this coming fiscal 17 year, but for 5 years, without even having the opportunity in the next, say, month to have our business manager begin to start to crunch our general operating budgets from last year, and how does that reflect? For example, we were just notified a few weeks ago that our insurance for all our employees is or will dramatically go up, including the municipal side. So how does that impact this particular promise of a percentage? Are we already promising something that we're so close to that number that we can't be anything but wrong in 5 months? And then we would be in the position of signing something saying, well, gee, we're sorry, but. So that's something that we tripped over as we reviewed this, and hopefully in the next week or 10 days we can get a little bit more clarification from the town side.
Sharon?
I would just request that when the subcommittee for the finances is going to have a meeting, if I could just, or any of us could just get an email so we know, because it's really hard to jump into this and to make any good decisions with that. I'm not talking about to participate, just to hear, because the background of this is kind of hard to pick up in. I kind of get the gist of where you're going, but I don't have enough information to be thinking about all of the, basically because we're such a new district, I'm not sure what our track record is and if we have enough knowledge to make these decisions right yet.
That's why we're not getting into it deeply, because we need to have further conversations before we can do a full presentation. We just want everybody in the committee to be aware that Howard has come to us and they're looking for this, and we're going to be moving forward to make it a little bit more of an even memorandum of understanding.
Or not.
Or not. Karen?
I just had I guess it's a procedural question. I was wondering where you posted the meeting notice for the finance subcommittee meeting? And where you will be
Yeah.
posting them?
Yeah, that doesn't have to be posted, does it?
Yeah, posted.
According to our policy, as required by law, a minimum of 48 hours advance notice will be given for any meeting of the school committee, including all subcommittee meetings.
Posted on our website, isn't it?
They're posted on our website.
I didn't see any, I looked and I didn't see it, maybe I missed it.
My apologies. My illnesses have resulted in absences, and the budget subcommittee meeting wasn't posted, however, the policy subcommittee. They generally are posted.
Do we have someone that could do it if you're absent? Is there someone else that's authorized in your place?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
But rather than have to check that all the time, could we just from the committee get an email so you don't have to go looking at the website all the time? That would be great.
Any other subcommittee reports? Superintendent's report.
Just to sort of loop back to close reading and sources. There was a professional development that our elementary educators all attended last Thursday that was led by Nancy Boyles, who is a national consultant on close reading and writing. And Carla is unable to be here tonight, but I've asked Carla to give this group a primer in what it's about, and that'll come at our next school committee meeting. But each of the elementary educators, in addition to hearing from Nancy, got a book that has example lessons, just exemplars on how you would incorporate this technique across the curriculum. Just in terms of opening days, we're now, as my daughter now puts it, Dad, there's 178 more days to go. But we're in day 2. It was great yesterday going around to each of the buildings and seeing the students come in and their new outfits and backpacks and all that enthusiasm. There's still some fine tuning we need to do, particularly on the Chatham bus number 2. Katie was just giving me a report. We have at the beginning of last school year, we had some fine tuning that needed to be done with the bus routes, and we still have a couple buses are not in the middle school or high school on time, and then that sort of dominoes so that the elementary run starts getting later. But Cape Destination seems to be doing a good job of wrestling with those, so hopefully we'll get the buses running running closer to the schedule, and again, we kind of let parents know that, we may need to relook at what that schedule time is, but I know they're working hard to get the buses on time. We had a meeting, or I met with the Chatham Selectmen, had previously met with the Harwich Selectmen, so the select boards have signed off on the new signs for outside of the school. We still have that process needs to still work its way through the town processes on the planning boards or development boards in each town. So we're still waiting for hopefully final approval in both towns to actually have them fully signed off and get the signs and put in. But knock on wood, we'll have those sometime in October. We also have, or recently, been having a lot of conversations on what to do about the grass around the high school. One of Ed's favorite conversations to have with me. But many people have noticed or commented that the grass that's been growing around the high school building proper, or particularly the grass that's growing out on what will be the future fields on the front lawn of the high school, has occasionally got too high to mow. And one of the challenges has been the subcontractor that does that landscaping for the construction project is located out in western Massachusetts. So we had a meeting with the subcontractor, intercontractor, and have suggested, and I think there's general buy-in from all parties that it would be probably better for everybody, including the subcontractor, to not have to go get their equipment from Chicopee out here to mow our lawn a couple times a week, but to have us engage in a contract with an entity closer home to get this mowed and then back charge the construction project for this. So in the efforts of collaboration, we reached out to the town manager in Harwich and the superintendent in Cranberry Valley, and Steve Lutinowicz and I had a meeting just yesterday, it's all blurring together, to look at having the staff at Cranberry Valley take care of mowing around the building and the fields. So I've asked them to give us a quote. I'm expecting one probably by Friday. The contractor, the landscaping contractor, is still tasked with some. There's a couple areas out there in the front lawn that after the sprinklers are on, there's some ponding of water that are low that they need to bring that up to grade, and then do deal with, what is it, nuts edge, whatever that like green grassy thing that weed that comes out in lawns to knock down the nuts edge and to fertilize. So there's lots of stuff that the landscape contractor is still charged with, but we're looking to engage with Cranberry Valley in a mowing contract for at least through the rest of this growing season, through November, and then ideally pick it up back in spring. I included in the packet for you. I know some of you came to our opening day with staff last Wednesday, but I wanted to include in there a couple slides that I shared with staff, and then also included in your packet just kind of the raw information on where the slides came from. But I shared with the staff the top 7 things from the parent survey that we administered last spring. Here's what parents said we're doing well, and the things we're doing well are highlighted. The top 7 are highlighted in the darker color, which I need my glasses for that. And number 7 was The parents appreciate the enrichment and special programs offered during the school day. 6, the strong, challenging curriculum instruction. Number 5, in sort of increasing order between Letterman style. Maybe it's Stephen Colbert style, I don't know, I don't know if he does that. Wide array of academic offerings is number 5. Number 4, teachers care about, support, and or understand students and families. 3, administration's communication home. 2, communication between teachers and home. And number 1, 23% of the respondents to the survey spoke about their child's teachers as a whole, or spoke about particular individuals. So these are, this is me taking the raw responses and trying to lump them into themes. Each of the principals got the raw responses for their buildings. This was me trying to just say, okay, what are those main themes? I also shared with with our staff, what did the parents say we could do better? So in there, number 7, their student doesn't feel connected, respected, or valued by teachers or a teacher. 6, the parents wanted to see more opportunities for their involvement or growth of PTOs. 5, the parents had specific, very child-specific issues with the athletic program or coach. 4, which seems is very very focused on elementary schools. It's parent pickup and drop-off issues. Coincidentally, I shared with the staff, only one person from Chatham, despite all that I heard, expressed an issue with the parent pickup and drop-off. 12 of them, 12 of these 13 actually came from Harwich at elementary school. But when I think pickup and drop-off, I just know it's a logistical challenge for some parents. 3, the parents are asking, have teachers use Aspen more consistently to allow parents to support their students. 2, better, more consistent communication from teachers to home, and 1, better communication from school administration to home. And that was the most frequent one, which was 14%. 14% of the respondents. So in the slides that I shared with you, I called that list. If you take out the athletic piece and the parent pickup, I kind of pointed out that a lot of what the parents were saying we're doing really well are things that the parents are also saying that we could go and work on, and just emphasize to the staff that if we really look at that, there are 2 themes in there, and if they're showing up on the things that we're doing well and the things that we're not doing well, what it's really talking about is what's really important to parents. And I would say, the first is connection. Just how important is it that we're connecting with students? It makes the educational experience for the child, or it really is a big issue. I can speak for myself as a father. My son, I used to say, was fickle, and every year, 1st through 4th grade, he fell in love with a new woman at elementary school, and it's like kindergarten teacher is in love with new woman, 1st grade teacher in love with this one, and I remember it was just specifically, it was 5th grade year. It's like he came home, and we moved here in 6th grade, by the way, so 5th grade, he came home, and it was not a love connection, and when you'd ask my 5th grader about this, it's like, well, why not? And some of those same words you hear in the survey, it's like he just felt like she didn't care about it, and it was that little connected piece there, and and I know from a parent's perspective, it pains you when you hear or sense that or feel that. And I also shared with that you have those moments for teachers that that you have that the time Rich has with the passing period, and the time that that Rich and other teachers, or you see Robin in the hallway, before school, and, reaching out and, and asking a child about their day, themselves, and conveying that you care, that you know them. That makes all the difference in the world. And I think that's one of the themes that, that's really important that, we as a district, work on. The other thing, or the other theme that I shared in the slide is, figure out which direction my little packet's going here. The importance of communication. There were a couple of things that parents were saying, we're doing really well. And there are a couple of things that it's almost like they're saying the exact opposite thing. You also find this other places in the survey. You'll have a few parents are saying, we want more homework. And a few parents saying, we want less homework. But it's, but this is up there in that, those top few. And again, I shared my own example as a parent. Again, this was with my son, and really applauded, one of the staff members who I thought made all the difference in the world last year for my son in terms of a proactive outreach from a teacher to say, hey, he calls up my wife saying, your son hasn't been doing what he's supposed to do. He hasn't been turning in the homework, and it kind of alerted us as parents early on, and scheduled an appointment with my son to get him in there, and so what was heading down the road to be a lower grade ends up to be a fairly respectable grade at the end. But it wouldn't have happened had there not been that communication, that outreach. But also, it helped us as parents to go, sit down every Friday and look at Aspen. That became the Friday routine, and say, it's okay. Did you do your French homework? If you did your French homework and you did your other homework, here's $20 and enjoy going to the movies with Terry's grandson and all the rest of the folks. If not,
He didn't do his Go.
Yeah. If not, you save me $20. I'll have the cell phone, and we can go and start working on our homework this weekend. But it's, I think that that ability to help parents, help their children navigate, and ideally, I'm also, as a former high school person, I also acknowledge that my hope is that, that by the time my son's sophomore, junior, senior, that he's doing that more and more on his own, and that there's less and less of me needing to go and shepherd. And I fully acknowledge at this point that that there's a need to shepherd, and my hope is before I send him off to college and my daughter off to college, that that you have that growth and owning things. So. And then I was just kind of, just sort of shared with the staff, if you take that communication and that connection, that's really hitting, if we go back to our mission statement, it's hitting that support, the support of schools that, that we want to be, and then just kind of talked with the staff very briefly about, how we want to focus this year on moving from a mission to a strategic plan. And then on that last, the last thing I shared in the packet here was just sort of foreshadowing a couple of things that they're going to be hearing from us. One was close close reading and writing from sources, and just that was the PD that was happening the following day, last Thursday. But it was also sharing with the staff the piece and the reason why. In the draft of the strategic plan that we've included, looking at the math curriculum, and that comes from conversations that I've had, and I know that that many others have had with parents, just on where are our students, and I had a chat with a parent who's come actually to our meetings to speak to us, just raising the concern that her child wants to be an engineer, but if we go along the math track that we currently have, that her son needed to take a class at Cape Cod Community College to kind of launch ahead in math and be ready for AP calculus. And on my end, I want to make sure that that we're leaving our students as they're heading into 8th grade, ready for algebra, so that, so that calculus is a natural place that, that students can get to if that's the direction that they want to head. So it's just sort of a brief, over or foreshadowing of things and directions we'd like to go. Last thing, just in terms of dates, we have curriculum nights coming up. September 24th is the high school curriculum night, 6:30, 8:30. On September 29th, it's the Chatham Elementary School curriculum night for all those grades. The kindergarten first and second are at 6 o'clock, and then third and fourth at 7. Harwich Elementary curriculum night is also on the 29th for grades 1 and 3. Grades 1 at 6 o'clock, grade 3 at 7 o'clock. September 30th is the middle school curriculum night at 6:30, and October 1st is the Harwich Elementary curriculum night part 2 for kindergarten at 5 o'clock, grade 2 at 6 o'clock, grade 4 at 7 o'clock. The last two dates that folks might want to participate in. September 28th is when we have our meeting with the Harwich Board of Selectmen, which is in part why the Finance Subcommittee was talking about that draft. There's an expectation from the selectmen that this group, specifically at the last selectmen's meeting I was at, I was specifically told that some members don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from the elected officials how we feel about the draft plan. So, so I think it's important that some members of the school committee are there to share your perspectives on that. I'll gladly share mine.
Scott, was that the 28th for Harwich?
28th for Harwich.
And that's at 7?
6:30.
6:30?
Their meeting starts at 6:30. So where on the agenda will be, I'm not sure.
Then October 13th, we were recently notified that there is a Chatham Budget Summit at 5 p.m. So those are sort of dates to put on your calendars if you're interested. So that's October 13th at 5 p.m. for the Chatham Budget Summit. And that would be it for me.
May I ask a question? Concerning the school bus routes, a parent came to me wondering about the bus routes, actually having an objection and wanting to see if it could be changed. What is the process for that? Because their child was picked up at the beginning of the route in the morning and then dropped off at the end of the route in the afternoon.
So they can contact Cape Destinations, and on the website under where the bus routes are published, there's the phone number for Cape Destinations, and Gretchen is the contact person there. I've also shared with some families that have talked with me about similar concerns. I think some of the challenges, depending on the bus route and depending on where where the house is relative to the school, that ideally it theoretically is nice that the first person to get on the bus might be the first person to be able to get off of the bus, but if the bus has to go run out to the furthest extent of its route before it starts dropping off students, it potentially then takes what could have been a 50-minute bus route from beginning to end and has the travel time to the end of the destination tacked on, so it so it starts to get into the hour-plus time frame, which is I think why some of the guidance that we've given Cape Destinations is to try to keep everything into that 50 minutes and below.
In this particular bus route, the route was the opposite way on the return last year. I happen to be familiar with that particular route. And the person that talked to me said they had contacted Cape Destinations and hadn't really gotten an answer as to why it was actually reversed. So what I'm saying is that the bus route, basically the child that was picked up at the beginning of the morning and dropped off at the end, at the end of the day, it was the other way around. They were picked up at first in the morning at the beginning of the route, and then they were dropped off first on the return. And that seems to make sense. So these particular children, there are a few of them aren't on the bus the longest, more than anyone else. And as I said, the route was the opposite last year, the return route. So I just want to know what the process was to make sure that it was equitable and, you know, in line with last year's route.
Yeah, well,
It wasn't an issue of it being longer, because I don't think the route was any longer last year.
yeah, I'm sure if the parent hasn't let Cape Destinations know, they have a list of, you know, I think there's probably over 50 different requests to add stops to, you know, to rethink this about routes, and they'll be incorporating as much of that into it, and we'll be in contact with Katie and the administration on how they think routes should be revised as we get into the second week of school.
So the district and Cape Destinations both have input into the routes, correct?
We do.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy?
Can we get the start end times on the website? Because you have clueless parents like myself who
For
can't
school?
remember what time, and I'm
Good
too
job.
embarrassed to call you, Robin, and
Put that on
say,
Diane's list for
what
tomorrow.
time does school end?
We'll on it tomorrow.
So I had to call Nancy and ask her, when does school end again?
My fifth grader had to remember, her sixth grader had to remember.
Yeah, I couldn't find it anywhere. I'm like, it's gotta be somewhere, and I think it's on the calendar, and then it says 40-minute early dismiss. I'm like, 40 minutes from what? What time is it?
I'm sure we can get that up
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, I have a question. In our last meeting, I'm not sure if this is where to bring this up, you can correct me if it's the wrong place to ask the question. We had talked about some website changes in the program of studies. I was wondering if we had a date for that, as far as when that would be completed? Is this the wrong place? I'm sorry to ask. In the agenda.
My life has been a little bit crazy the last couple of weeks, so we'll have it on our next agenda
Okay.
to discuss website changes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? We have 2 action items for this evening. One being the declaration of surplus equipment.
Why are you looking at me? I would move to declare surplus the outdated science textbooks, quantity of 100 from the high school outside of room 224. Lovely picture, biology textbooks.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Biology books are outdated, the creationism turned out to be right.
Any discussion, other than Mr. Whitaker?
I think I used to use some of these, so I'm not feeling outdated too.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved. Next on the agenda is the approval of the Monomoy Regional High School and Monomoy Regional Middle School handbooks, which were handed out at our last meeting. Any discussion on the handbooks?
Yeah, there was some discussion about the, about changing the requirements for Honor Society at the high school.
Requirements for,
Honor Society, the GPA, changing the GPA level. And we had asked for more information. I think Sharon had.
I don't think that was gonna be changed, I think that was talking about being changed.
she said it's an open, it's a discussion.
It's part of
Not
the
changing
discussion,
yet.
upcoming discussion.
It wasn't a change to the process for this year, but it's a discussion for going forward.
Oh, I guess I misunderstood. I thought that was part of what we were approving, was to make that change.
I think This was,
Be in the minutes.
this was Janie informing the
Yeah.
committee of conversations that were coming.
Okay. My misunderstanding.
I move we approve the middle school handbook and the high school handbooks.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. We will now be going into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law 38, Section 21, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining units and non-unit contracts. Do I have a motion to that effect? So moved. Second?
Second?
Roll call?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Yes. And we will not be returning to public session. Thank you, everyone.